stride.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mortgage and Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by the Pinnacle Loans. My name is Chris Giannino, and I am joined by my brother Pete Giannino. And today we are going to talk about strategies to purchase your desired home in this market, a market where rates are higher but still historically low, values on homes are up, and inventory is down. Those features together seem to make for a very competitive market. Now, today we are going to talk about some strategies and steps to take you where you want to be in terms of real estate. Pete, great to be with you.
To be with you, Chris, and always great to be here at our favorite piece of real estate in Wildwood, Missouri, our family farm out here. And happy to be talking about today's topic. I want to kind of dive right in because there's a lot to unpack here today. When we're talking about inventory, Chris, what does that mean in connection with the residential real estate market?
When people use the word inventory in real estate, they're typically talking about the number of homes that are listed for sale on the MLS.
Okay, and listed for sale on the MLS to the layperson is really equivalent to a for sale sign in the yard. Is that right?
It is. So I guess when you put it like that, it actually would also include any for sale by owners. So a sign in the yard listed by an owner of a home or also listed by a real estate agent. And there are also some homes that are for sale that do not have a sign in the yard, but are still listed for sale. Maybe the neighbors just don't want a sign in the yard. So, but in general, the number of homes that are available to be purchased and are advertising that they do want to sell.
Okay. So the general word on the street right now is that inventory is low. And that's a broad phrase, but I think the perception is that it means less houses are available for sale, so people don't have enough to choose from when buying. Is that what you understand?
That's right. Yes.
Okay. So it's an interesting thought because you mentioned that values are up and interest rates are still historically low, even though they are up from the last year, and yet people aren't selling. So I wonder why that is. If I bet that if this podcast actually was taking place in an auditorium and the room was filled with an audience and we posed this question: who in this room thinks that they could sell their home at a price that they want and in a time frame that they want? I feel like the response we'd elicit is a lot of people tentatively raising their hands with their tips of their fingers approaching the bottom of their earlobes until they look next to them and see if anyone else is raising their hand. But I think that number would be high. Again, the question: who in here thinks they could sell the home for the price they want in the time they want? So why aren't people doing that? I think that the hands would be raised. Is that your understanding?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the reasons that I believe that to be true is that right now you're still seeing 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 offers, or at least initial showings, scheduled showings for listings that do become advertised on the market. So, and many of those people are not first-time home buyers, so, meaning they do have another primary residence that they own. They may want to sell it first. They may not be able to qualify for both, but for whatever reason, they are looking for homes to purchase before they list their house to sell. And probably one of the main reasons is because they wouldn't have a place to live.
and when just to come back to your initial point about low inventory, I bet if I picked out the guy in the front row who was one of the few eager guys who raised his hand, and I would say to him, why aren't you listing your home if you think you can get the price you want in the time frame you want? Why aren't you listing? What's he going to say to me? He's probably going to say, there's nothing for me to buy. And that's what we want to deal with today. There's nothing to buy, meaning, I guess that goes back to our original concept about low inventory. He's going to say there's nothing to buy. So if he's not selling because he can't buy anything, then we got a perpetual situation because he's elected not to sell because he can't find something to buy, and we can't get his house on the market to sell. So now we have to deal with how to get that house on the market or how to make that individual feel like he can find something to buy. We can't hide the fact that listings seem low right now, low relative to the demand. We can't hide that fact. We have to find a way to address it. We're in a little bit of a state of paralysis right now, and so we need to find a solution.
I have an idea.
Yeah, talk to us.
Why don't we just do like a national listing day where we specify a date and we say, hey, how about on March 1st, if you live in, let's just say Missouri, that if you're in the market to sell your home and purchase a home, that's all everybody listed on March 1st. Can we do that? I'll get a couple billboards. We'll put it up. We'll see what happens. And I think if we have enough buildup, maybe we'll just instantly increase inventory. Would that work?
Absolutely, it would work. It's not that people have an apprehension to buying, as that's not what's causing this fear to list. It's because they don't have the tools, the knowledge, the confidence that they can buy or that there will be something for them to buy. So the apprehension comes from this. The apprehension to list comes from the fear of not knowing what or whether or can they buy something. But if everyone lists that wants to, if we had this room full of people in the auditorium and we asked who feels they can get the price they want in the time they want, and nearly everyone raises their hand. Of course, not everyone wants to sell because maybe there's another reason that they're holding on to their home. But if it's just this apprehension due to not knowing what is available to buy, then presumably those people are all in a position to list. And we need to understand how, well, actually we do understand, and we're going to present that to you today. But if, in fact, there is this National Listing Day, hell, we just had National Pizza Day, and I bet no one had an apprehension about whether to go get a pizza. And no one even knew they wanted pizza until someone said it was National Pizza Day. Now, your idea of National Listing Day sounds wild, but on the other hand, it's a way to create movement and opportunity and comfort with listing your home. Everyone in this room hesitantly put their hand up because they were uncomfortable, even though they know that they could get the price they want in the time they want in this environment.
Yeah, because people could go to a showing right now and they could put an offer in on a home and they still have a house to sell. Although they know to a reasonable degree that they could sell it very quickly for the desired price, it's still not sold. So that's a lot of it's risk that that when they make their offer, they might be thinking to themselves, oh shoot, I might have 2 mortgages that I have to pay for, or perhaps they need to sell that house to be able to qualify for the next home. There was some hesitation on certain people waiting for the interest rates to drop. However, I don't think that's so much of the issue right now, because like I said, I mean, I've been talking to people and our clients as well. They've been competing against 20, 30, 40 people when it comes time to get a house. So I think that may be something that can be overcome, because if you want to buy a house, you have to buy a house on the current rates if you're financing it. That's just the way it is. Some people do have a little bit of apprehension leaving the interest rate of 2.75% that they have on current primary, which we could talk about that as well. But I would say waiting for rates to drop, that's overcome a little bit. Some people have reservation because they believe they can't compete with multiple offers. And other people may think they can't qualify when they have both mortgages at the same time. And like I said, I think the fourth apprehension may be they don't want to lose the low rate that they have on their current home. However, let's bypass to a lot of that because of the multiple offers on every house. Now we're back to the inventory question. How do we overcome that is I think the name of the game this year.
Yeah, and it's given, again, we're working backwards a little bit, but I think you raise a lot of good points. And let's just reiterate. Listings are not limited because people don't want to list. In other words, it's different from I simply don't want to list my house. In fact, what it is that I want to list my house, but I either don't believe I can find something to buy, or have another reason, which are the ones you identified. So look, I think it is important to, since we have to figure out why people are apprehensive to list, which we get, again, is not because of a lack of a desire, but it really has to do with their comfort level with buying. We need to address what are those fears or apprehensions with respect to buying. And you alluded to some of them, but I think it's important to enumerate them because we can, that gets to the heart of some of the strategies that we can pass along to people. So one thing you referenced, Chris, again, we think the elephant in the room is high demand, low inventory, but we also think that there is a concept about interest rates that is causing people not to want to enter as a buyer. Let's address the interest rate situation. So we know that last year and the year prior, interest rates were at historical lows. It was not uncommon for people to pursue a 30-year mortgage and a conventional loan for an interest rate of 3% and even less. Is that right?
Correct.
And today, that same buyer profile would probably be looking at an interest rate of maybe twice that amount. So perhaps it would be 5.5%, or 5.875, or 6%. So someone is looking at that picture and saying, why would I buy a house now? The rates were 3% a year ago. And how do we deal with those? How do we deal with that notion? Because what kind of question how might you pose that to a buyer if they ask that question today? How might you address a buyer worried about interest rates today?
Yeah, and I would say it depends because obviously everybody's situation is different. But I can tell you about one situation right off the bat. I'll just answer that. Let's just assume that these are people that are not scared of the interest rate necessarily because there are a bunch of people still trying to buy those houses. But we'll address the ones that don't want to leave their current interest rate. We'll address that, and then we'll move on to the others. So the people that don't want to leave their interest rate, yesterday I had a closing. The closing was a previous client of mine. They bought a primary residence 2 years ago, or about a year and a half ago, And we had closed on the loan. They lived in their primary residence. It was 2.75% on a 30-year fixed term. And this purchaser wanted to now buy a new primary home and had found their desired home and were able to land that home and get it under contract. The interest rate, the going interest rate at the time that we locked in was at 6.375%, which we did lock in at 6.375%. This particular buyer was also able to receive a credit from the seller because it seemed, I don't know, I think he bought it at a very, very good time. It was in the middle of the winter. People were a little bit more skeptical on what was going on in the housing market. It was a very small window, I think, of opportunity where this particular seller was considering dropping the price. Well, the buyer, in turn, was able to get a seller credit, and we bought down the interest rate on a temporary buy down. It's called a 2-1 temporary buy down. And in this case, that means in the first year, his rate was going to be 2 points less, which was 4.375. The second year is going to be 5.375, and the third year was going to be 6.375. And so he took advantage of that, knowing that he could refinance anytime he wanted if rates did drop. On his original primary home that he had a 2.75%, in his case, he was one of those individuals that could not stomach parting from his rate of 2.75%. And he ended up keeping that home, and while under contract, he was able to secure a tenant to rent out that property from him at $2,900 per month. His current principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, his full PITI payment for that house was at $2,300 per month. So he was able to net $600 a month, still keep that 2.75%. He received an excellent rate of rent because rents are, they're up right now. People are able to charge good money for rent. And that helped him swallow the pill of the higher interest rate quite a bit. Not to mention, he took advantage of all the tricks and all the tools in the market because he got the temporary rate buy down and he kept his house to still take advantage of that 2.75%. So that's one option, one realistic example that can certainly be implemented. And another thing with that is if you're unable to qualify for both properties at the same time because your debt to income ratio is too high with both mortgage payments, that lease agreement that he had for his previous primary residence was able to offset most of that payment. So all of a sudden, it was really just like he had to qualify with one mortgage because he had that lease agreement. So that's one option in that situation where you have a tough time parting with that lower rate. The other option is, you're buying a house to live in with your family. So it is what it is. You buy the best house you can find in the market that's presented to you. And right now, that's the rates are higher than they were a few years ago.
Well, why shouldn't people just wait a year for rates to drop? Are rates going to drop?
Well, I mean, two things could happen. Either rates could drop or rates could go up. Now, if you buy a home now and you wait, if you buy a home now and the rates drop, then you could refinance. If you don't buy a home now and you wait for the rates to drop, well, then now you're in a much more competitive market because you weren't the only person waiting for interest rates to drop. So now you're in a much more competitive market, and when rates drop, values typically go up. So waiting for rates to drop is not really, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because they're either going to go drop or they're going to go up. If you waited for them to drop but they went up, well, then now you're in a worse situation. If you bought a house and then they dropped, well, then you can refinance and you already have your house.
It's interesting. I'm sure if anyone said, let's wait for rates to drop until they're 3%, if someone would have said that 20 years ago, they would have waited 18 years for that to happen. let's wait until rates drop to 3%. If I said that when I first entered the real estate market as a home buyer in 1998, if I said to myself, I'll get in this market as soon as rates get to 3%, I would have bought my first home 2 years ago. That's a long time to wait for rates to drop. Who would have known? So there were opportunities to refinance along the way, which I took advantage of and which anyone can take advantage of in the future. Now, on the other hand, is it possible that rates might go up tomorrow, next year, and 2 years from now? Absolutely, it's possible. In fact, we are still in a time where interest rates are at historical low ranges, whereas the lowest points occurred 2 years ago. Okay, so we addressed interest rates. You also addressed opportunities in connection with, you touched on it, but that example you had so many amazing features to it. But let's identify one of the features that you referenced, and that is wanting a new house, but really being proud of that rate you locked in a year or two ago of 2.75. You want a new house. You want to move, but you mentally, psychologically, it's hard for you to come to grips with buying a new house and paying an interest rate of 6% when you have an interest rate on your existing mortgage of 2.75%. So describe again in just this narrow context how you might be able to keep that 2.75% and still buy a new house.
Well, you keep that rate by keeping that house and turning it into a rental by simply finding a tenant for that home. Now you have a tenant paying your mortgage at 2.75%. You have a new mortgage. In this case, it was 6.375%. But that client is netting $600 a month from the rental, which they could apply to the difference in the rate on the new home.
What a great strategy. And one of the intricate details to that it could go unnoticed is that if not only are interest rates on primary residences higher than they were a year or two ago, but also interest rates on investment properties are higher than they were a year or two ago. So if you were to, and they're higher than primary residence. So if you were to buy a new investment property today, that rate is going to be even higher than 6.375, most likely.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. So essentially, you were able to get an investment property at 2.75%. In this case, the buyer purchased a new home with a 5% down payment. So if you have 5% for the down payment, instead of taking it from the sale proceeds of your current home, then essentially you could have a rental at 2.75% with 5% down.
With respect to, so now we've dealt with this apprehension about interest rates, both in terms of the idea of waiting for rates to drop. We've dealt with interest rates in terms of a fear of losing the great rate you secured 1 or 2 years ago. And now let's also look at, because I think it flows from this example Chris provided from his recent closing, but the ability to qualify. And in your case, Chris, going back to that example, because it just is ripe, it is full of opportunity. That person essentially would have to qualify for 2 mortgages at once. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
And so what are some, you can even go outside of your example, but what are some strategies available when you might have to buy before you sell your existing home and have two mortgages for qualification purposes on a new mortgage?
Yeah. Well, one option would be to do what this individual did, and you could secure a 12-month lease agreement before you close on the new home. And that lease agreement allows you to use that income from the lease to offset your mortgage payment. And in some cases, you can even show a net profit from it. Now, we work with different guidelines. Fannie Mae has a whole set of guidelines, and Freddie Mac has a whole set of guidelines. They're both different, but the one option that we used was to be able to use the entire net proceeds. So the one option is secure a lease. Another option that we've used and clients have used in the past is to obtain a non-occupying co-borrower when purchasing the second property. So when you want to buy a new primary, but you are more comfortable buying before you sell your home, but you don't qualify with both houses and you don't intend on leasing the property because you want to sell it and do something with those proceeds, then you may have a parent, a grandparent, a brother, a sister, someone close to you that may agree to go on your loan with you as a non-occupying co-borrower. So that way you could qualify for both homes and can make an offer that is not contingent upon you selling your current home.
That's great. And essentially, when we use the word qualify with respect to this issue, we're talking about qualify from a debt to income standpoint. So in other words, we know your monthly debts are going to go up with 2 mortgages. So we have to show increased income in certain instances. And so the way to get increased income is through rental income on the one hand, or the income of a non-occupying co-borrower. And just a little plug for our prior another episode we had in this podcast about non-occupying co-borrowers being used in connection with purchasing homes for college students. So check that one out too. To recap where we have been and dealing with the apprehensions and fears that people have today, again, we were talking about waiting for rates to drop, the fear of losing the great rate you got in the last 2 years, and the obstacles that might exist in connection with qualification for a second mortgage, particularly with respect to debt to income ratio. So, but I can't, I still have to kind of revisit, Chris, just one last time, the example you have provided in connection with your recent closing, because in one transaction, your client addressed each of these fears or overcame them. He was able to buy down his interest rate to get something that was attractive. He was able to maintain the very low interest rate from his mortgage from a couple of years ago. He was able to enhance his qualification from a debt to income standpoint by creating a rental stream with his existing home. And not only that, he increased his assets and also created an income generating opportunity. So you have to share with me and the audience, like, what kind of individual is doing this kind of buying and borrowing in this unique environment.
Yeah, with this buyer, he pulled the trigger. That's what he did. He pulled the trigger. We sat down and we talked about his current situation and what he was trying to do. And once we sit down and figure out where you're currently at and where you want to be and all your concerns along the way, we can really custom and cater a game plan step by step to get there. And in his case, we put it together. We came up with a great concept to win the contract along with his real estate agent. and he was able to utilize many of the tools in this market to his advantage. But yeah, I mean, mainly we came up with a game plan for his specific situation. And then once we were done with the game plan, he did what he needed to do, which was pull the trigger. And we closed less than 30 days after he was under contract. So it was a pretty quick process, too. It's not terribly complicated. It's simply, I mean, people are doing it every single day. Those are the type of people that are winning these contracts on houses. You're wondering who's winning them. These are the type of people that are prepared, that have their ducks in a row, and are ready to pull the trigger when the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, it sounds like someone too open to expanding his opportunities. Not just boxed in, not just paralyzed with fear, but ready to move forward and take advantage of opportunities.
Exactly.
Well, great for him, and hopefully there will be many more like him to make money in his sleep, as they say, by having rental property, rental income, and still having a great primary residence. But, of course, the world isn't comprised solely of those types of people. So there's a lot of more traditional home buyers or home seekers out there. And, what about the people that need to sell their home? In other words, need those down payment, need those proceeds from the sale for their down payment, don't have a willing and able non-occupant co-borrower, don't want to go through renting their former home, soon to be former home, but are in a position to sell, but may not have found the home to buy. Talk about those people and what solution or progress they might make.
Yes, I would say there are two distinct options for those buyers. One option is this. They list their home to sell right about this time of the year, and they get a buyer for their home. And here's the deal. In today's market, still, the sellers are in the driver's seat for the most part. So let's say you come to me and you want to buy my house. And I say, okay, I have 10 offers. All right. And they're all very close on price. And I tell the buyer, listen, I'm going to accept your offer, but I would like to close in 60 days, 65 days. And they say, oh, awesome. That works out well for them too. So they agree to those terms. Now I have my house under contract, and I have, let's just say, 50 days to get under contract on a new home. My house is already under contract. I know I'm going to have those proceeds. I know I can eliminate that payment from my debt to income ratio. And I have 50 days or so to find the house that I want to buy. Now, you got to work with a lender that can close really quickly because that would only give you 15 days to close or so. We can certainly accommodate those turn times, and there's others that can as well, I'm sure. But that gives you the opportunity to do that. You're taking a little bit of risk because you do have to find the house that you're going to move into within that time period. However, you know you're going into spring, so inventory is going to go up. So you have that opportunity. If worse comes to worse and you're not able to secure a new home, then you go with the sell, rent, buy strategy. However, it's likely that with the right support and the right real estate agent and the right team, you could win a contract in that time period and close simultaneously. So that way you can use the proceeds from the sale of your house for the purchase of the new house.
So you're talking about selling now, and hopefully on National Listing Day, renting temporarily, and then buying the home you want.
Yes.
Very simple.
If you have to.
Right.
I've seen many times, where if they have control over the sale of their house and they push that closing date out They can get under contract on a new home within that time period.
That's great. So, yeah,
But you got to win the contract.
So we talked about the buyers who are ready to pull the trigger, ready to take advantage of the tools, the conditions of the current market. We've talked about the more traditional home buyer or homeowner who's been apprehensive to sell because he doesn't have a place to buy. We've talked about strategies that might enable that person to buy by selling now, renting temporarily if necessary, and buying the home they want again, or just selling, extending that closing date, and then buying the home they want. So in each of those examples, we're talking about we come back to what we started with, which is how do we buy in these conditions? Who is winning the deals when there is low inventory and there might be 30 offers on a house? Who is winning these deals? Chris, give us some features, some characteristics, some strategies of those buyers that win.
Usually the buyers that win are the ones that lost out on the past 4 contracts, and they've learned a lot along the way. So removing contingencies on appraisal, removing contingencies on selling your current home, considering the risks and reward of removing contingencies on inspections, letting the sellers know that you will cover any gap between the appraisal and the purchase price. There's all different sorts of strategies accommodating to their closing date. So there's many different strategies that we can discuss, and we plan on doing that on the next episode. We will go through all the ins and outs on different considerations and what it legitimately takes from proven buyers to win a contract in a competitive market where there's multiple offers on just about every desirable home.
Yeah, feel empowered. Feel like you have opportunity. This is not a time in the industry, in the business of real estate. This is not a time to sit back and wait for the time to be right. The time is actually very right now. In fact, at this point, if you wait, you're going to miss that opportunity. Don't end up with the 3rd or 4th or 5th house that you're interested in simply because you weren't equipped or willing to take the steps necessary to put yourself in the strongest position.
Please feel free to reach out to us with any questions at all about real estate, mortgage, investment properties, or just other opportunities in real estate. We are very happy you tuned in to listen to the show. Thanks again. We look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you.